Last week, we took a look at Nintendo's beginnings, from a century-old card game manufacturer to the name in video games during the 80s and 90s. Now the year is 1995, gaming is moving into 3D, and Sony has joined the battle. Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're moving into part 2 of the history of Nintendo. Before we begin, we publish new content all week long, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Before the century was over, Nintendo would produce 3 more consoles, as the industry started to see a major shift to 3D graphics. The first of these systems, the Virtual Boy, was a total failure due to its bulky design and eye-strain-inducing red and black screens. The less said about that, the better. Their next major home console was the Nintendo 64, and it was released in 1996, selling an astounding 500,000 units in Japan on the first day of release, and roughly 350 units in North America. This was due in part to the release of the instant classic Super Mario 64, and followed up a few years later with The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. However, despite its very strong library of first and second-party titles, third-party support suffered due to the system's use of expensive cartridges, compared to its biggest competitor, the Sony PlayStation, which used far cheaper compact discs. While the system was still very successful by selling 32 million units, it was clear that Nintendo was no longer the biggest name in gaming.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Finally, Nintendo concluded the decade by releasing the Gameboy Color as an upgraded version of their already popular Game Boy. And riding off the back of the global phenomenon known as Pokémon, the system sold upwards of 54 million units, bringing the Game Boy line's total sales to 118 million. Nintendo began the new century by releasing the Game Boy Advance in 2001, a whole new console with power to rival that of the SNES in handheld form. It practically dominated the handheld scene during its lifespan, and went on to sell over 81 million units.
Dixie and Diddy team up with new friends to save the Big Ape. Donkey Kong Country 2, only for Game Boy Advance.
That same year, Nintendo also released the GameCube. This was the 6th generation console for Nintendo, and it competed with other home consoles including the PlayStation 2, as well as Microsoft's first home console, Xbox. The GameCube used a proprietary optical disc format for storage, and thus did not support other forms of media such as DVDs and audio CDs. While this console garnered fairly positive reviews upon release with games like Super Smash Bros. And Metroid Prime, the console also garnered a fair bit of criticism for its general lack of features compared to other competing consoles, and only sold 22 million units before it was discontinued in 2007. In May of 2002, longtime Nintendo president Hiroshi Yamauchi stepped down and named Satoru Iwata as his successor. Around the same period of time, Nintendo's notoriously aggressive business tactics, especially in Europe, would result in the European Commission fining the company 149 million euros for anti-competitive price fixing, which the Commission determined had taken place as far back as the early 1990s. This massive fine was one of the largest fines ever given in the history of the European Commission. Several years later in 2004, Nintendo would release a new handheld device that broke away from the established handheld Game Boy lineup. This console, known as the Nintendo DS, featured 2 screens, with one of the screens being touch-sensitive. This mobile console also further innovated the handheld gaming industry by featuring a built-in microphone, as well as the ability to wirelessly connect to networks. One specific wireless feature allows fellow DS owners to connect with each other when their devices were close to each other. The console ended up selling a combined 154 million units worldwide, making it the most successful handheld console of all time.
DS not only changes Nintendo, it changes our industry.
In early 2006, Nintendo announced the Nintendo Wii, a system built around the use of motion controls, as opposed to pushing graphical horsepower. The Wii was released at the end of that same year, and performed extremely well in the market, which resulted in a sigh of relief for Nintendo, who had struggled to pick up the slack from the underperforming sales of the GameCube. The unique motion control capabilities of the Wii opened the gaming sphere to a whole new audience of gamers, with titles like Wii Sports, Endless Ocean, and Big Brain Academy. Yet the Wii balanced this strategy by continuing to cater to longtime fans, with titles like Super Mario Galaxy and Metroid Prime 3: Corruption. In 2011, Nintendo released their successor to the Nintendo DS with the 3DS, which used glasses-free 3D displays. While the system continues to sell well to this day, it had a very rocky launch, as its high price and lackluster launch lineup pushed CEO Satoru Iwata to take a pay cut and reduce the price of the system to make it more competitive. Well, it worked. And as of March 2018, the system has sold over 72 million units.
That is so cool.
In 2012, Nintendo released their successor to the Wii, the Wii U. This 8th generation console would be the first Nintendo system to support HD graphics, and continued the company's history of innovation and unique design through the use of the touchscreen as a supplemental device to the main display. Despite a positive initial reception, the system struggled at retail mostly thanks to its confusing marketing and weak third-party support compared to its competitors, the PS4 and Xbox One. This ultimately led to the system selling a mere 13.5 million units and a short lifespan. Sadly, in 2015, Satoru Iwata passed away from surgery complications. Before his passing, however, he had begun to restructure the company to focus more on handheld gaming following the Wii U's poor performance, including beginning an initiative in the mobile market as well as supervision on the development of their newest console.
For Mr. Iwata, it was not enough to repeat the words of Nintendo's mission, to surprise and delight with the unexpected. He lived those words. He was unique.
Tatsumi Kimmi took over Iwata's role and continued to oversee these new developments. Iwata's legacy worked, and Nintendo began to reverse their poor sales trends with the release of the Nintendo Switch in 2017, a system that could be used as either a handheld gaming console or as a home console. It also had a very strong first-year lineup, starting with the launch of the critically acclaimed The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, a title that earned numerous Game of the Year awards, including our own, and was a primary selling point for many consumers. Super Mario Odyssey capped off their year with equal praise. In fact, after the first year of availability, the Switch became the fastest-selling console in several regions of the world. Ultimately, the success of the Switch would raise Nintendo's stock price to its highest level in 7 years. All in all, Nintendo remains one of the most influential gaming companies in the world. The company's transformation from humble card company to multi-billion-dollar powerhouse did not happen overnight, but involved innovative thinking and keen business tactics that would mold the gaming landscape for decades to come. Just recently, Shuntaro Furukawa became the new president of Nintendo. Where will he decide to take the company from here on out? Only time will tell.
Nintendo Switch!
Thanks for watching Mojo Plays. Be sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and check out our suggestion page in the description below.